my ring gear on it, so I have something for my starter motor to engage in to spin the motor over to start it. Okay. A lot of ring gears, you heat them up, press them on, they cool off, and they form an interference fit, and they stay on the ring gear or stay on the flywheel. Some of them bolt on. Okay.
Mike,
Yes.
on the automatics, is it a flex plate versus flywheel?
It's on the automatics, because the torque converter serves most of the functions of the flywheel, such as it's heavy, it helps smooth out the impulses. Okay, a flex plate is a thinner piece of steel that mounts to the back of the crankshaft and then allows the torque converter to mount to the flex plate, coupling the engine to the transmission. Good question, thank you. Now, some things we have to do when we're putting the back half of the motor together. Okay? You have to make sure that your flywheel is centered to the center of your crankshaft. If it's not going to be spinning true, it's going to be spinning in an ellipse. And that's going to wear out the rear main bearings, it's going to wear out the bearings of whatever it's driving, and it could be cause for a failure. Okay? Now, most of the guys, when they get a crankshaft, the flange that the flywheel bolts to is also machined flat. Okay? To make sure that when I put the flywheel on, it's not sitting in an angle, it's sitting flat. Okay? Some crankshafts will have a dowel used to center the flywheel to the center of the crankshaft. Okay? You can have the flywheel turned to flatten its surface. If the surface isn't flat, if you're driving a tractor trailer with a manual transmission, you're going to get clutch chatter because the clutch won't be able to engage the whole part of the flywheel. Okay? You should use new bolts when you're mounting the flywheel to it. I mean, that's not a place you want to scrimp and save money. Is, oh, I reused my flywheel mounting bolts because I didn't want to spend the $50 for the new set. Now you weigh that against what's it going to cost you if it fails. About $17,000. I'll spend the $50. Okay. So when you look at your flywheel, this is a dial indicator. It's mounted to the bell housing, and I'm rotating my flywheel, and I'm making sure it's flat. If I get a lot of reading, it's doing one of these things. That's going to play hell on your clutches and your clutch discs. That's also going to play hell on your torque converter and the input shaft to your transmission. He's also measuring the pilot hole to make sure it's round. So the clutch and the pilot shaft on the transmission are centered to the center of the flywheel, which is centered to the center of the crankshaft. Okay? If the flywheel has run out, it can be machined. You take it off, go down to the machine shop. Usually, trucking companies will have the crankshaft and flywheel machined at the same time. They'll machine the flange on the crankshaft, they'll machine the flywheel, so the two are custom fit. Okay? Now, in our world, that Cummins that's sitting out there, it can go in a boat, it can go in a bus, it can go in a truck, it can drive a pump, it can drive a generator. So the mounting surfaces are going to be different sizes. So the bell housing on that is removable. Now your automotive engine, the bell housing is not. Because your Ford is only going to get a Ford transmission, usually. Okay? So there's no need to make a replaceable flywheel for multiple adaptations, because the Ford engine in your car is only going to run the Ford transmission that came with it. So when you install your flywheel, you have to make sure your flywheel is centered to the center of your crankshaft. So dimension A better equal dimension D, and A should equal C. If not, some of these have alignment dowels that can be resized to center it, the flywheel housing, but you should check it. Okay. Some of them are pre-fit. So as long as the dowel is there, it's going to be centered. And I think that's what ours are. Okay. So when you install the flywheel housing, the housing must be centered to the center of the crankshaft. So if the housing's centered to the center of the crankshaft and the flywheel's centered to the center of the crankshaft, everything's going to spin true, not in an ellipse. If the housing is offset, it's not centered. Let's say this dimension is less than this dimension. Then whatever's attached to the flywheel is going to put a side load on the crankshaft. Crankshafts don't like side loads. They will break. You will wear out input shaft bearings to whatever it is you're turning. And then if it's a drive line, your drive line will be, you'll introduce a compound angle in a drive line that doesn't have a compound angle. That's an offset. Putting additional strain on your U-joints. That's mechanical U-joints, not U-joints. Give me a joint. Different kind of joint. Okay, now, that particular problem would be a bear to troubleshoot. If I put enough compound angle in that drive line, I'm going to introduce a vibration. Right? I'm going to introduce a vibration in my drive line. And if that vibration is because my transmission is offset, because the bell housing is offset, and I've got an angle in the drive line that's like that instead of straight, and I've got to troubleshoot this thing, that's not one of the first places I'm going to be checking. And when we get into drive lines, you'll see why. So, you know, every kind of misstep here has collateral problems down the path of power. We good? Imagine that. We're done. Have a good day. For those of you who are off, enjoy the rest of your day off.
Thank you.
Good. For those of you that don't, enjoy the rest of your day anyway. Go where you need to go.